Welcome to the number one podcast covering Michigan State basketball. The Final Four is not on the schedule. Join Rod and me, Eric, as we dive deep into the Spartans to get you prepared for every game. Subscribe today for in-depth recruiting updates and fantastic interviews with today's important college basketball personalities like Robbie Hummel.
Thanks for having me. I have listened to your guys' podcast numerous times on drives throughout any Midwestern Big Ten city. So I am big fans of your guys' work.
Jay Billis.
And next time, hey, if anybody in Michigan wants a December tea time, call me. You wimps won't show up, but I'll be there. I'll be there and play in the cold. And Izzo will be in front of the fire with hot chocolate.
Coaches Thomas Kelly.
No problem. Glad to be back, man. Glad to be back.
Mike Garland.
You just can't sit there and trade twos for threes. You can't do it. You're going to lose. Coming down the stretch, you're going to lose.
And more. You won't find better coverage of Spartan hoops than you will get here. For both the casual and hardcore fan, come along as we take you for a green and white ride. Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod, here to review MSU's 82-61 win over the Michigan Wolverines. Before we begin, a quick word of thanks to listeners who support the show. Joseph Lambert gave a one-time gift via Venmo. Thanks a lot, Joseph. Also, Ken Kremet gave us a one-time gift via PayPal as well. We appreciate both you guys and all of you who support us on a recurring basis too at Patreon and Substack. If you'd like to support the show, head on over to our support page at tffinots.com/support. And while you're there, you can find links to all our sponsors for their services, Coach Garland's book, a free variety pack from LMNT Electrolyte Additive, and Podbean links to start your own podcast. You can also access our logo apparel shop, which will only be open for a few more days. It closes on February 5th at 8 p.m. So if you want to own your own sweet TFF iNuts logo apparel that looks and feels great, click on the link at the support page and you can order today. All right, Rod, let's discuss the game. It was a game of milestones as Tom Izzo got his 700th win and had his 69th birthday. AJ Hoggard got his 1,000th point, and Jaden Akins had a career night, 23 points with 7 threes. MSU looked very pedestrian in the first half, and aside from Jaden Akins and Trey Holloman, didn't show a whole lot. I thought defensively I didn't feel like they were bad, but they sort of played 20 to 25 seconds of great defense, and then Michigan just hit shots, and they hit a lot, whether they were contested or not. They ended up, the end of the half, I think, shooting 69%, but only had a 35-33 lead over MSU heading to half, thanks to a very late flurry from Michigan State. The second half was a different story, with Jaden Akins coming out on fire, both ends of the court, and number of defensive stops and steals leading to quick baskets put Michigan State up by double digits really in the blink of an eye. And then it was pretty much lights out from that point. Michigan shot miserably at just 25% and kept the game close-ish, basically living off the foul line late in the game. So a win that looks easy, but it felt a little uneasy at half, although I guess I wasn't super worried because I just felt there's no way this team can sustain the way they're shooting.
Well, I will say this. We talked about in the preview that for a team that's having a bad year, there's one thing Michigan does pretty well, and that's shoot the basketball. Right. And I felt that Michigan State defensively in the first half did very, very little to make Michigan feel uncomfortable. And that's what you have to do against a team that shoots well. And what do I mean by uncomfortable? I mean, all the things that you saw Michigan State do so well in the second half, they did not really do in the first, which means shot windows are shorter or non-existent. You're pushing guys off the spots they want to get to. So somebody like Cambois, for example, in the first half, when he was on the floor, I didn't think Michigan State did a great job. I thought he was able to play within the rhythm that he wants to play, and he hurt Michigan State because of that. In the second half, that didn't happen. So that was part of it. And then, of course, Michigan hit some shots they had no business hitting. Terrace Reed hits his first 3 of the year. I thought Trey Jackson had a couple of baskets in the first half around the rim that were absolute prayers that went. But you know what? That's the kind of stuff that happens when you're not doing a good enough job defensively and you let a good team, or even sometimes a bad shooting team, but especially a good shooting team, you let them establish a rhythm and start feeling good about themselves and and comfortable, well, then all of a sudden, even some of the bad shots they take are going to go. It just
Right.
tends to flow that way. And that was my problem with the first half, primarily, was that. Defensive rebounding was a massive issue the whole game, and we'll get to that. But really, the game, Michigan State, other than maybe the first, 6 or 7 minutes, and I want to say it was during that stretch, MSU ended this game with only 6 turnovers. I believe 4 of them happened in the first 6 or 7 minutes. So they were pretty much pristine from that point on. But other than the first 6 or 7 minutes of the game, I thought Michigan State actually played pretty well offensively. They were over 50% from the floor in the first half. Let's see it. They were right at 50% in the first half and 50% from 3. But the things changed in that second half, and they changed, I think. Yes, you could talk about Jaden Akins getting hot. Malik Hall had, I thought, a very good second half, being aggressive around the blocks. I thought A.J. Hoggard was outstanding, really took control of the game. Michigan State ran. They did a lot of things well. But to me, that game turned mostly because Michigan State played defense in the second half the way they needed to, which is you don't give guys comfortable looks. You bump them off the spots that they're comfortable with and make them take shots under duress, a step or two further away from the basket than they want to be, all of that stuff. And on top of all that, you get aggressive in forcing turnovers, which Michigan had 13 turnovers in this game. 11 of them were steals. 9 of those came from the 4 guards. So Michigan State in the second half really got after it in that aspect of the game, which we had talked about as something we thought they might be able to do. So I just felt, the thing that was most irritating to me about it in the first half was, look, we know, and if you and I can talk about it and say, hey, Michigan is essentially a point guardless team at this point, and their secondary ball handlers aren't all that good either, then how can you let them be that comfortable running their offense? And Michigan State did. Yeah. And in the second half, that stuff stopped cold. And MSU really ratcheted. It wasn't like they were pressing. It wasn't even like they were fully up into Michigan. Actually, I think they did less than I wanted to see more of that. When Jaden Llewellyn or Amari Burnett is handling the ball, trying to initiate offense, to me, hey, Trey Holloman, get up into him. And obviously he's following the game plan. Michigan State, for whatever reason, opted not to do that. But they were still, they were much more aggressive, I felt, in the second half. And that was really the ball game, because it shouldn't surprise anybody that Michigan State had an incredible offensive game, and it was, by any measure, a phenomenal offensive performance. Why do I say that? Well, we know Michigan State's a very good offensive team anyway, despite what some fans might think. They are. They're a top. Well, let's call them a good offensive team. They've solidified themselves as a top 40, even a top 30 offense. But Michigan is such a horrendous defensive team that you put those two elements together, and it should make for a really efficient, really good offensive performance, unless you're just having one of those nights where nothing is going. And that clearly was not the case for Michigan State. They mostly in the form of Jaden Akins. You mentioned a career night, 7 of 10 from 3. He had 7 of the 9 makes from 3. I believe Trey had 1 and Xavier Booker had the other. And then the rest of it was all Jaden. He was just dialed in. And once that was happening, there was no hope for Michigan. And pretty much the majority of the second half was played with a double-digit lead for Michigan State. They, as you said, they got out. They erased that 2-point halftime deficit very quickly, and not only took the lead, but really pushed it out. I mean, they went on an incredible run early in the second half. And so I would say from about, the 14-minute mark, something like that, this essentially was game over, you know?
Yeah, it certainly felt that way.
They just, Michigan could kind of, you know, the lead would get out to 15, and then it would be played between 10 and 15 for a while. And then toward the end of the game, MSU pushed it out closer to 20, and, you know, it ended up, 18?
19.
That's about right. Yeah. That's about right in terms of the margin of difference between these two teams, I felt. But again, that was largely because Michigan State decided to show up and actually guard somebody in the second half. And that didn't happen well enough in the first. And so, you know, you have a teaching point, certainly, which by this time of the year, I'm sure Tom Izzo doesn't feel like he really needs any more, but he got one in the first half. Second half shows you what they can be on that end. Again, other than the rebounding, which continues to be just absolutely confounding. I mean, every single way you can do it. There's some times where it's not a sufficient effort. There's times where guys have it just go. There was one Jackson Kohler had. I didn't understand why.
Off his face.
I just didn't. I didn't understand it. Then there's, you know, plays where they tap the ball out. You know, it was just a variety of things that had long rebounds. The guards don't chase down. Izzo talked about that in his pregame press conference. The need for Michigan State's guards to have something we've talked about all year. They've got to be better. So that is still of concern. But really, that's the big negative coming out of this. Most everything else other than the first half defense and maybe free throw shooting, I guess, although it had marginal impact, was a real positive. Michigan State shot the ball. They moved the ball extremely well. Again, the second half defense was outstanding. They actually did offensive rebound okay. They had, I think, a 33% offensive rebounding rate, which is okay.
Correct.
But
Michigan's 48%.
Right, that's the problem. There was still a big edge, but you know, you look at the difference. Michigan had, in second chance points, they had a 13-9 edge. Okay, so they had an edge there.
Not much.
Right, not a lot. Points off turnovers, Michigan had 10, Michigan State had 20. So, you know, as we like to do, because I think it makes a lot of sense, we talk about turnovers and rebounding kind of in conjunction, because they're both things that they're the two elements of the game that can give you an edge in terms of the number of scoring opportunities you have. And so it makes sense to talk about them in conjunction. If you do talk about them that way, even with the terrible defensive rebounding job Michigan State did, they were still a +6 in terms of points related to all that activity.
The one thing that was really, was pretty crazy, I think, of the game was just the foul calls in this game. Michigan ends up shooting 26 free throws. They were 12-22 in the second half. In the first half, both teams were pretty much the same. I think Michigan was, 2-4? I think Michigan State was 2-5.
Yeah.
So, both were not very good at the free throw line. Michigan State has 3 free throws in the second half. Michigan had 22. I felt like as far as attacking the rim, not really much difference between the two teams.
I agree.
I don't, and I think there was contact. There were plenty. I wouldn't say there weren't fouls because there were clearly fouls, but I felt like there were fouls both ways. It was very strange. I don't quite understand how that happened.
And this is something that has been, I think some fans have noticed, and I think there's something to it, and I'm not sure what the explanation is, but Michigan State's guards are not getting rewarded for contact at the rim the way it seems some other teams are. And that was very clearly evident in that second half. And I think the explanation you'll hear is what allows you to make contact but not get called for a foul is staying vertical. So if the big man goes up, but he's in the space he occupied and he's going straight up, he's not leaning into the shooter, then that's considered to be good guarding position, and you're not committing a foul, even if there's contact between the shooter and the defender, But if there, I see a lot of foul calls on Michigan State in this game certainly, and in some others, it's not constant, but in some others as well, where it sure looks to me like the Michigan State player maintained his principle of verticality, went straight up, and he still gets called for it. So I'm not sure what the explanation is. That, I mean, you saw Izzo really working the officials about several of those calls or non-calls. And I think he was asking for exactly the same thing that you just said, which is, hey, if it's going to be called at that end, you got to call it here because the plays are exactly the same. The contact is exactly the same. The position of the defender is exactly the same. You know, didn't matter, obviously. and Michigan certainly, one thing you would say, if I were a Michigan fan, I would be looking at just a dreadful free throw performances. There aren't a lot of times that they come into Breslin and they get that many more attempts at the line than Michigan State did. You know, that's not typically supposed to happen. So you finally get that kind of game, and whatever they shot, they were pretty miserable.
I mean, 54% in the second half, 12 or 22.
14 for 26, 54%. That's just not going to cut it. So they definitely left. You know, if you even had, it wouldn't have made a difference ultimately in the final score here or in the win-loss, I should say. Would have made a difference in the final score, even if let's say they hit 20 of 26. So a good but not incredible performance. 6 more points, you're talking about a 12-point game. The argument you could make, of course, is that if you pick those up, it might change the nature of the game as a whole. You know, you never know.
Yeah,
but
maybe a little.
But I would be disappointed in that were I a Michigan fan. Thankfully, I'm not. I don't know what the answer is. I am particularly mystified by A.J. Hoggard not getting more whistles. I don't understand it
so much.
I do not understand it. I don't know if he's kind of getting. I don't know if it's that he's kind of getting a guard version of Shaq treatment, where they look at him and they think, well, he's big, he's strong, and they don't think that a foul is a foul anymore because of that. I don't know, but I think, you know, I've pointed this out on the Spartan Mag board. Last time I checked, and I think it was just before this game. I think it was after the Wisconsin game, or it may have been just before that. I'm not sure. At any rate, sometime very recently, he was averaging a full 1.5 fewer free throw attempts per game than he did last season. That might not sound like much, but that's a massive drop. And he wasn't getting enough free throw attempts last year, in my opinion. He was at 4.6, which, you know, you look at some of these guards around the league, and you do have guys who are up around, 6, 7 free throw attempts per game. And I look at the way they play the game, and I say, well, they're not any more aggressive than AJ is. Why is AJ not getting those calls? Not sure the answer. I'd be curious if, it would be great if somebody on the beat writers asked Izzo that question as to what he thinks the issue is. And I'm serious because, Izzo may, outside of the heat of the moment in the games, he may have an honest take where he feels like there's something AJ isn't doing well enough to sell it. I don't know, but I don't think that's the case, but I'm speculating. Maybe there is something that they see that, the rest of us would not, but on the surface of it, it kind of defies easy explanation. I would agree with that.
And I think you can make an argument early in the season, he was not going to the hole enough.
Right.
But that is not the case anymore. And there are multiple times he's ending up on the deck because he's taking contact. Definitely Michigan State teaches you to finish through contact. They practice that, right? Probably every team does to some extent. And I don't know. I don't understand because you look at the numbers. Michigan State had 48 points in the paint.
Yep.
Michigan with 12 or 18 or something like that. Now, part of that is because every time they were going to the paint, they got a foul call. I do think there are times too when the referees wait to see what happens with the shot. If it doesn't go, there's that little bit late whistle.
It's the worst.
But it's sort of like if it's a really egregious, they'll give you an opportunity for an and one. I don't know. I mean,
the two things I cannot stand are that and the other side of it where they anticipate contact and call a foul when there isn't
right.
any. There was a play like that tonight. I think it took place in the first half, and I can't remember who the Michigan player was that had the ball, but somebody from Michigan State was behind him, and Trey Holloman kind of slid between him and the basket. It was on the baseline. Trey Holloman was there, clearly there. I mean, it wasn't a bang-bang play. He was there, and he was straight up. He didn't leave his feet. He was there, and they called a foul. It was not a foul. And the guy called it before the contact was made. I watched it happen. Like, you can't do that, you know? And it happens. It happens a lot, these anticipatory foul calls where they see a play unfolding and they just have the instinct that contact's going to happen, and then it doesn't. But anyway, it certainly, as frustrating as it is, at least in this game, it really didn't impact things very much.
No, I agree. The other notable things, Michigan State's fast breaks, 17-4 edge on Michigan in the second half.
Yeah.
I mean, that really was the story in the second half.
That's where I give AJ a lot of credit, because I thought he was really, really good in the second half. Pushing, he had the one play in particular, although there were several that he made that were outside.
Cooper?
Yeah, Cooper rim running.
That pass and that catch.
I'll tell you something. For a team that the two centers that are playing the majority of the minutes and have for most of the year are good athletes for fives. They both are.
Mm-hmm.
And Michigan State has gotten so little out of that this year, out of rim running. And some of it is that, I would say, part of the problem can be when your guards are not chipping in enough on the defensive boards. Your centers don't have the ability to get out and do that the way you'd like.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of it. It's
Sure.
not that, I don't think it's that Marty and Carson are being lazy. I just think that the way things have evolved for them as a defensive rebounding team, it hasn't allowed for that. But it was really nice to see, and it was nice to see Carson make a tough catch. That was not an easy play. AJ made a great pass, but it was a tight window. It was kind of like some of these throws that Jared Goff makes, where you say, boy, that's a tight window this guy's throwing in, but then you realize, but that guy's got an arm and touch that he can make that play. So it's not as risky as it might be for another quarterback. Well, sort of the same thing there. It was a tight window, but AJ delivered it right where Carson could catch it, and he made the play, went up, finished it, drew the foul, converted the free throw. It was really nice to see, because we've just seen less of it than I would like. Let's put it that. I'm sure less of it than Tom Izzo would like. But yeah, MSU's transition game, especially in the second half, was really, really good. And again, that was something I think we felt like, this is a bad defensive team at Michigan, and it's an undisciplined defensive team. And when you're facing teams like that, you should be able to create opportunities to run. And just imagine this. Just imagine what it would have looked like in that area of the game if Michigan State had defensively rebounded worth a damn. They did all that, giving up whatever it was, a 48% offensive rebounding rate. Just insane.
To an average offensive rebounding team.
Definitely the strips, the steals played a part in that for sure, as to how they were still able to generate transition opportunities. But boy, it could have been even better.
Yeah, they've now been out rebounded by 7 of their 10 Big Ten games.
That's
just by absolute numbers.
You're talking raw numbers or percentages?
Mm-hmm, just raw numbers.
That's not good. That's not good. And this was arguably the worst. It's got to be the highest percentage in a Big Ten game. I can't imagine anybody's broken 50.
Well, I mean, Wisconsin was pretty close to that, but it wasn't probably quite 48.
Right.
It was pretty. It was in the 40s somewhere.
It was.
So
You're right. You're right about that. Yeah, it's back to back. Not good.
So other things, I mean, aside from Cooper, the mysterious thing about Carson Cooper, he makes that amazing catch in that rim run, and then Kohler tosses him a ball from like a foot and a half away, and it goes through his hands.
Well, no, that didn't
go
through. That didn't go through his hands. That was actually deflected off him.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
all right.
It was the unfortunate thing about that is, I mean, an unselfish play by Jackson Kohler. Jackson Kohler had the shot. He should have gone up for the shot.
Yeah, he should have.
He should have gone up for
sure.
the shot. That was on him, in my opinion.
So let's talk about Jackson a little bit, because I was turning to my wife and I'm like, I'm watching him out there and I'm thinking to myself, he is better instinctively rebounding than Sissoko. Like, Sissoko has the athleticism, he has the ability to get to the balls, but I feel like it's a little bit like we were talking about Julius Marble a couple years ago. A guy has all the tools and everything there, except for whatever reason, he seems to just have to watch a beat longer than everybody else to where the ball's going. Kohler, I don't know, maybe he's played basketball since he's 3 or whatever.
Yep.
He just kind of knows where it's going to be. This kind of reminds me of like Thomas Kithier was this way a couple years ago.
That's a good comparison.
And I think when you compare him to Mahdi and Cooper, Jackson looked much more comfortable defensively out there moving. I mean, I thought he was fine. I didn't see huge breakdowns.
Yep.
He may not set screens as well, but he gives you something offensively. I mean, I'm going to call it now. I think he's going to be starting by the end of the year, and I think Sissoko is going to come off the bench at some point. That's just my hunch. We'll see. I could be wrong, but I think he's going to bring more to that position than the other two at this point.
I would say this. I think there's a possibility. It depends. It depends how the strides that Jackson continues to make from here, and it also depends. Let's be honest. It's entirely, I think, less so with Mahdi, but with Carson Cooper. Carson Cooper can play better than he's been playing. I thought he was pretty good today. I really did. I thought he played a good overall game today. Did a lot of good things. He could find another level, and defensively, there's no question his potential is better than Jackson's. The rebounding thing, look, Mahdi's a better rebounder than Julius Marble ever thought of being. So,
for sure, no question.
And I think you're right. And there were people last year. I remember there was this discussion, and some joker was trying to claim Jackson Kohler was the worst rebounder Michigan State had ever had. It was like, I looked at the numbers, his rebound rates per minute on the floor. It's like, no, actually, he's not bad. And I agree with you about his instincts. Now, sometimes a guy, that's not enough, because a guy can just be out physicaled by an opponent.
For sure.
But it sure as hell helps if you have an intuitive sense of where the ball's likely to go, and you can get yourself there. And I agree with you about Jackson. I think that, particularly as an offensive rebounder, he had 2 offensive rebounds on 1 possession tonight. And I felt that way last year, that he has a knack for offensive rebounding that nobody else on the roster had last year or this year. So, I do think there are other gears he has to go. I also think that he seems to be holding up okay defensively. He played 10 minutes in this game. I don't really remember him getting his ass kicked by anybody.
I mean, there's some one-on-one underneath the basket,
but I don't
guy
know
backs
who,
him down. But
I don't know who scored on him. Did Reed get a bucket on him?
No, I feel like it was
Camois.
Who was it? Yeah, Camois.
Maybe,
I think. Yeah,
but it was probably one.
Yeah.
If that, Jackson played 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's just one bucket.
So they weren't able. It's not like we'd see sometimes last year where an opponent would see him come in the game and say, "All right, post isos," and just boom, steady diet of it, or try to get him out away from the basket, trying to handle pick and roll. I actually thought he showed okay in that phase of the game too.
Yeah, so I agree. Yeah.
There's room for growth, and he could play a bigger role as we go. I think this might be the most minutes he's played thus far. I'd have to go check if it was more in the Wisconsin game, but 10 minutes is, he's hitting double digits, so that's a step forward.
And then I think the other one to talk about is Booker.
Yeah.
So he had 2 turns, one in the first half, one in the second half. I feel like his first half turn was the first time we saw him really compete.
Yeah.
Like he was going after rebounds. And you saw that at the other end. Then he started playing better offensively, and he had an energy level which he hasn't shown all season. So I was really impressed that his second half turn was kind of like you've seen it earlier this season. But we at least now have tape.
Well, and
So
here's the other thing. I thought he showed well defensively in that stretch too, in the first half. It wasn't, just, look, he banked in a three. You can't do somersaults over that. And then, the other thing with Xavier Booker is, for better or for worse, when he's on the floor, if he's got even half a window from three, he's going to let the shot fly. That's what we've seen, which is not a great thing. He shows, thus far, he has shown no shot selection at all. He will put it up the moment, and he's hitting enough of them that it gets people excited. But I know it's that he doesn't get a lot of minutes, so when he's out there, he feels like he needs to do something, and that's what he does best offensively.
Right. Exactly.
That kind of shot selection next year, assuming he's here and he's playing a much bigger role, will be a problem, and I suspect it's going to change. But enough of the negative. I think that there were some nice positives for him in this game, and I agree. His turn in the first half was pretty good.
Well, let's move on. I guess.
I want to talk about Cohen Carr.
Okay.
He had two great plays, and then one that shows why he's not playing more minutes than he is right now. And I'll tell you what they were. So two great plays were, he made a great weak side help block of Kemwa. And as they said on the broadcast, Robbie Hummel, I'm not going to argue with him about this. He said 99% of the time that play is a dunk for Kemwa, because he was not just coming down the lane looking to lay it in. He was going and take the rim down. Yeah. And as he put it, he said, Cohen Carr is that 1% who can actually make that play. And those guys just aren't around very often, but he's one. It was a great defensive play, great instincts. And that's something we know because we've seen him do it. He does well. I thought the basket that he scored was really impressive, and we've seen him do that a couple of other times this year, but not with any regularity. Most of his scoring is obviously coming off lobs, in transition. Right. They get him loose on a screen on the baseline, and he gets a lob for a dunk. That's most of his scoring. But on a couple of occasions, we've seen him go off the dribble and kind of power his way to the hoop. He did that again here. The thing about that is, I think that's a weapon for him because his explosion athletically and his length really means he only has to get his body maybe about 8 feet away from the rim. He doesn't have to get all the way to the rim. He can finish from there with his explosion and his wingspan. And it was a nice physical play. Those are the great things. Now, I will tell you what the problem was that showed up in this game. There was a stretch in the second half where he was playing on the wing. And that's been a lot of his minutes this year have been as a 3, not a 4. And he must have gotten switched onto Llewellyn. And Llewellyn just kind of sized him up, didn't even really try to go past him, but just had enough space that he could just rise up and stick a 3 in his face. And that, to me, is the problem. And it's why, until that changes, you're going to find it hard to get him more minutes than he's getting right now. He has potential to be a very, very good defensive player, I think. But he is not ready to guard perimeter shooters. Big men, I think he's got a better chance because big men don't have as much of a threat of going by him. So he can play up a little more aggressively. But we've seen this before from him, and tonight was another example of it. If he can't manage to contest better than he did on that play, I don't know how many minutes you can play him at that spot. Because eventually, the way, Michigan State's principles, Michigan State is a team that switches. So if you're out there for enough possession, sooner or later, even if we've got you on their 3-man, who maybe isn't a great perimeter shooter, sooner or later, you're going to be in a situation where you're guarding their 2 or their point guard, who might be better shooters.
Right.
And that's where I think the problem lies. Now, on a hopeful note, they know, if I could see that, damn well know they know that. Michigan State staff knows that. And so that is an area where I think between now and the end of the season, that's an area where I think it's possible that Cohen could make strides, because he has all the physical tools you need for it, and he's got the want to. It's about recognition, and it's about technique. It's making sure that you're not, if you looked at that possession, I'd encourage anybody who wants to know more about what I'm talking about, watch that possession. He's maybe, I don't even know if it's a full step. He's maybe a half step too deep for Llewellyn, because again, you got to know your personnel. Llewellyn's shooting like 50% from 3. He's been killing it. Not heavy volume yet, because he hasn't played that much, but he's been at it, and he didn't do himself any damage tonight with the way he shot from 3. So you have to know, all right, that's, if it's Namari Burnett, all right, he's an okay shooter, but Terrence Williams is okay this year. Llewellyn, you can't do that. And Llewellyn's not his primary responsibility. So how dialed into him he was in the scouting report, I don't know. But think about that kind of possession. If it's a 5-point game in the second half and you're trying to hold them off, and you just let that guy stick a very casual, very comfortable 3 in your face, you can't have that. So something to watch for, to see if Cohen can make progress there and prove to be more readily and consistently playable defensively at that spot. The 4, I have fewer concerns, but the 3, it's a problem.
All right, so then we'll move on to our Michigan State player that they need to keep in the gutter. And then brought to you by the Brothers at Just Two Gutters. They have franchises in the Grand Rapids area and the Metro Detroit area. If you need your gutters worked on, repaired, cleaned, replaced, whatever it might be, whether it's your house or your business, the Brothers at Just Two Gutters are the ones you should contact. They are specialists in just doing gutters. And of course, we deal with plenty of rain. Well, today more fog than rain, but we had rain today, melting snow, all sorts of problems. If you don't have good gutters on your house, it will cause water pooling, getting into your basement, into your house, whatever. It's always a problem. So you want to make sure you have the right people doing it. They go out in just about any weather. So even right now, they're out there on the job. So you can find ways to contact them at the Final Four, it's not on the schedule.com/support. There you can find a way to get an estimate from either Greg on the east side or Kurt on the west side. You get 10% off if you mention Final Four when getting your estimate. And so the player that Michigan State had to keep in the gutter was Olivier Kamua. I guess that's
Kamwa.
How to pronounce it. Kamwa. Sorry, yeah, Kamwa. He had 9 points, was 4-10 from the field, 0 for 1 from 3, split a pair of free throws, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 turnovers in 28 minutes. So I think we could safely say that they definitely kept him in the gutter, because he was the leading scorer for Michigan, coming in averaging 16.3 points a game. He had his rebounding average of 7, but I think they did a good job on him.
They did. They absolutely did. And, the first half, it was funny. He sat quite a while because he got 2 fouls very quickly. But then they brought him back, and it was a real risk. And they got away with it. He didn't get a 3rd foul, and he gave them some scoring punch. He ended up, I think he had 6 points in the first half. So the second half, we really played without fouls impacting things very much. He only scored 3 points in the half. And Malik Hall he had 9 and 7, but very inefficient, 4 for 10. Malik Hall, 6 for 8 from the floor for 12 points and 3 rebounds. I give the win there to Malik Hall. Now, Malik wasn't the only guy who guarded him. I thought Michigan State threw some good doubles at both he and Terrace Reed, and also some dig downs from the guards as well. They really did, especially in the second half, they did a very good job of containing Michigan's interior players. And obviously, as we talked about, other guys got their turns on Kamwa as well. but I give a lot of credit to Malik. I thought Malik Call just continued his very, very strong, consistent play that we've seen really now for whatever it is, 7 games, 8 games in a row. I guess it's 8 games because it's every game. It's every game since Big Ten play started back, right?
I mean, I guess you could say the Northwestern game.
That's what I mean. Every game around that. Yeah. So seven out of 8 now in double digits, and I think it's 5 or 6 in a row. And this was a really, really good showing because I thought in the second half he was a big part of that opening flurry. It was Jaden Akins hitting some threes and Michigan State forcing some turnovers, but Malik was in the middle of that too. And I just thought he played a really, really good game. And look, Kemwa, Michigan's having a bad year, and Kemwa has not been the defender, and it hasn't been that I think he was reputed to be individually, and I don't think he's been able to kind of rally the troops collectively the way a lot of people, including myself, thought he might. But offensively, he's had a hell of a year. And Michigan State really held him down.
Right, they left it, and they finally got somebody in the gutter again. Move on to the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids brings you the Michigan State player who cleans the glass the best. And so this is one of those games where no one really cleaned the glass well. Although I guess you could say AJ Hogard had 4 rebounds. Yep. He tied Madi Sissoko with 4. Hall had 3. Kohler had 3. Akins had 3. The team had 3. So I guess, I had Sissoko, and so I guess I kind of win. But I feel like it almost feels like a half victory.
Let's give you a half.
Yeah, so I guess I'll take a half. So I'm down 4 to 3.5 now because
that's
fair. It was not a great showing by anyone on the we should say the rebounding. We can talk about this in the keys of the game as well, but just really there's so many instances of they're always offensive rebounds you're going to give up in a game that are just strange circumstances, strange bounces that you have it happens.
Right.
But there are just a number of times that you just watching it, just like someone go get it, or why is no one trying to rebound? It's very, very frustrating, especially when we were talking to Coach Garland. He's like, just send you send everybody, and yet it doesn't seem to be happening, or
no,
I don't know. Well, it's inexplicable. And it doesn't seem. It seems to be getting worse.
Izzo mentioned in his pregame press conference that part of the issue, a big part of the issue in his mind, and I completely agree, is that the guards are not. Michigan State has been able to pride itself over the years on being responsible as a rebounding team, and yet still being able to run. And their guards have been leaking out too much this year. They're not staying in it to make sure that a rebound gets secured. Now, it's not all of them, but I'm telling you, I've been beating this drum for a while now. What separates good rebounding teams at Michigan State from groups like this one, you start the analysis with the guards. That is what separates them. When you've got good guard rebounding, you're going to have a good rebounding team. When you don't, you're probably going to struggle. And Michigan State does not have good guard rebounding right now. Now, in this game, you can say, well, hey, AJ got 4. Jaden had 3. Not good enough. Not good enough. And I do think this was a game, I'll be fair and say that I also think this was a game where Michigan State's interior guys were not great either. We talked about Jackson losing one.
I think that's true.
They let Michigan, manage to bat the ball back out a couple of times. That's effort. That's effort stuff. Disappointing all the way around.
That was a poor performance. But the nice thing is, if you want good performance, you can contact the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. They will take care of your home, your business, give you a high rise. Heck, they even clean the Capitol, the state Capitol. So they're the ones you can count on to make sure you have nice, clean windows. They can power wash your house. They can do the inside of the windows, the windowsills, the screens, which is one of the things that you never usually think of cleaning yourself, but the screens are really important to have them clean because you can makes a big difference in how well you can see out the window. So they came and did my house. They did fantastic work. They have a great price. They were meticulous and they're super friendly, great guys. And so it was a great experience having the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids come out. So I'd highly recommend them for anybody who's thinking about doing the windows, because you know what? It's more fun having someone else do it than you do it. and you get 15% off. You mentioned Rebound in when you get your estimate. You can find the contact information for the Squeegee Squad if you go to our support page. That's tiffknots.com/support, and just go down to the Squeegee Squad and hit the estimate, and you can get connected right to them, and they'll get back to you really quick and do, again, very professional. So finally, let's go through the 5 keys of the game, brought to you by Nudge Printing. And I did not find out who won the contest, so we'll have to wait until the Maryland pregame before you can find out. But Rod, so the question was, in March 4th, 2000, Mateen Cleaves gets 20 assists in a game, breaking the Big Ten and Michigan State record for single game assists in a 114-61 63 victory. Which team did Michigan State beat on that day?
Yeah, it was the same team they beat tonight, but in even more of a laugher. And Mateen Cleaves was courtside, of course, to see this one. That was a really, really remarkable performance. And the thing that I remember most about it, and I'd have to go back to check the stats. In fact, as we're talking, I'm going to quickly do that. The thing that I remember most about it is so many of his assists came on threes.
Yes.
And
well, the 114 points, you had to hit a bunch of threes, right, to get that.
And I seem to remember Charlie Bell who was not necessarily a knockdown 3-point shooter. I seem to remember him having a very, very big game, and I'm coming up. I'm kind of stalling. You can probably tell as I'm looking at this. I'm trying to see if I can get to a box score, and I'm not coming up with one.
While you're looking for that box score, let me just tell you a little bit more about Nudge Printing. So Nudge Printing is our store is open for the logo apparel, like I mentioned earlier in the show. Nudge Printing has vintage and fully licensed to Michigan State apparel, so you can get just the classic Michigan State stuff. You can get the vintage stuff. You can get all kinds of different shirts and zips and pullovers and hoodies. On our logo store, you can get that as well. So you can get Tiff Knots stuff, which look really sweet. And so I'd highly recommend you go get that. That store is only open until February 5th. You can find that, again, at our support page. And you can put in your order, and then they'll ship it out. If you want to do that yourself with something else, like maybe you're a function in your business or you have a fundraiser for your school, you can go to fabricatedcustoms.com. And that's Gabe and Brittany's store, where they actually do all the back end stuff, all the stuff that Rod loves to do, but is having to give up, going to the post office, shipping stuff, getting all those orders put together. They'll actually do all that for you. And so you can just have people go on, they log on, they select what they want, and they'll get it all shipped to them. They take care of the payments, all that stuff. And so if you want to do a fundraiser or something for your school, you can say, hey, we're going to add $5 or $10 to every shirt or whatever it might be, whatever you want to do. And they'll set up it the way you want. And then whatever is above the cost, they send you the check, and it makes it real easy for a fundraiser or something like that. So anyway, that's a great way to do stuff. We did that with our school, and they're super easy. They actually designed a logo, which is really cool too. So again, that's at nudgeprinting.com or fabricatedcustoms.com. You get to get anything you want. And Nudge actually just added Indiana University onto their schools. So they have other schools too. Most of the schools in Michigan, outside of the University of Michigan. So if you didn't come to the box score,
I did.
I did. So
I was right. Charlie Bell was 4 for 6 from 3. AJ Granger was 4 for 4. Jason Richardson 3 for 5. Michigan State as a team 16 for 32 from 3. And a lot of those,
make it easy to get the assists.
You know what's shocking? Morris Peterson was only 1 for 7, and he was 3 for 15 from the floor on a day where Michigan State puts up. I don't think many people would remember that. Well, they put up
no, I would
whatever
never
it was,
guess
114 points. So yeah, it was that was my vivid memory of it, was Mateen, and I do remember Granger hitting a bunch as well. I didn't remember Jason Richardson going 3 for 5, but I do remember Charlie Bell, because Charlie was, by that point in his career, he was a junior that year. He was a respectable shooter, but he wasn't a knockdown guy. So for him to have a day where he went 4 for 6 kind of stood out. But yeah, just an insane game from Michigan State's perspective. It was sort of the exclamation point on a regular season that was very much a roller coaster ride because, there was all the hype with a team coming back from a Final Four, returning a lot, although not everybody, and yet adding 2 really, really important players in Jason Richardson and Hawa Gagne, who were both freshmen. And then Cleves was out for a good portion of the non-conference, I think maybe the entirety of it. And MSU took their lumps. They had some big wins, but they also had several losses. And you just had to wonder, okay, how long is it going to take Cleves to get acclimated again? The Big Ten was extremely competitive that year. It had another Final Four team in Wisconsin. Purdue was an Elite 8 team that year. You had a building young team kind of starting to come on in Illinois with Frank Williams and Marcus Griffin and those guys, Sergio McLean. Indiana was still a very competitive team, even if they weren't at their peak. Ohio State had been a Final Four team the year before and were absolutely loaded. So it was no done deal that Michigan State was going to be able to reach expectations. And they fought their way through it. And by the end of the year, we're obviously playing extremely well. And that day was just the ultimate punctuation mark. It was probably the most enjoyable Michigan game I've ever seen from beginning to end, which, is obvious. You win by that much. But I will say it's not the one. I can think of a lot of them over the years that felt better than that because Michigan had much more competitive teams. It's kind of like this game, a much more extreme version of what this game was like. We know Michigan is a team that's really going through it. And to top everything off, they're playing without their only point guard, who happens to be probably the best player on their team as well. So this was one. They're all great to get over Michigan. There's never a bad win or a mediocre win even over Michigan. But this isn't one that's going to go in the memory banks other than the fact that it was Izzo 700. I think that's really the only thing that stands out about it. And that's largely because Michigan's just not very good. We've been fortunate that the last 25 years, 26 years, whatever it is, that Michigan State has always been at least a solid team in this rivalry. They haven't all been great every single year, but they've been a tournament team, right? Michigan, there's been much more variance. So when I think of the Michigan games that have really meant something and you felt, they were just important. I think of some games in the Beeline era. I can think about that game in, 2013, where Michigan had a ton of hype around them. Everybody was talking about Michigan and Indiana, and had kind of forgotten Michigan State a little bit. And Michigan State jumped them, and I don't think Breslin's ever been better than it was that day, and just ripped them up. You could think about the 3-game sweep that they had, one of which was played at the Breslin in 2019 en route to a Final Four. I thought that was a great win. The Kalen Lucas hitting a jumper with seconds to play to beat them at Chrysler. I mean, there's lots of those kind of Scott Skiles. I can't ever forget. That's probably the best. Absolutely torching Antoine Joubert. So Steve Smith and company winning in 1990, where it felt like you were finally getting past this albatross, getting the albatross from around your neck that Michigan had been for about 3 or 4 years running at that point en route to a Big Ten title. All those kind of things, those are the ones that you really remember. The laughers they're fun in the moment, but they're not as memorable ultimately, in my opinion. But except for the game we're talking about, because it was so extreme.
Well, your memory is truly amazing. I'm always stunned by it. I can barely remember what I had for dinner, much less what happened in 2013. So let's talk about the 5 keys of the game, brought to you by Nudge Printing. Number 1, guarding the arc. Well, not great, I guess is probably the quick way to say it. I mean, Michigan ended up shooting 40%, which is about their average. They were really good in the first half. They were 50. Oh, actually, the first half, they were 55.6%. They ended 40% because they were 27 in the second half.
Right. Definitely a tale of two halves. I thought the first half, there was a bad, the Reed 3 was a joke.
Yeah.
But
hit the grenade.
But most of them were just, as I said, Michigan State just let Michigan be way too comfortable. I thought, some of the threes Llewellyn got, you're not getting over the top. You're late recognizing him. It just wasn't the way you got to defend. And we talked about it. Michigan doesn't do that much well this year. That's one thing they do well. They shoot well generally, and they shoot well from 3. And so you can't let them be that comfortable. If you're going to make them look, if they had made a bunch of Terrace Reed type shots, okay. But it wasn't that way. That was one. And then the others, they were 4 for 8. And I thought Michigan State just didn't do the job. Second half, 3 for 11, far better in terms of the way they guarded those. I mentioned the one possession that Llewellyn took advantage of Cohen Carr. That was an exception. The rest of those possessions, I thought Michigan State did much, much better. So, overall, you're not happy giving up 40%, but I can live with the second half performance pretty well.
Yeah, I was really impressed with Jalen Llewellyn. I mean, he was really good from behind the arc.
Look, it's the thing he does, and he's been doing it this year. He's been doing it very well. The disappointing thing to me is I think for as much as Michigan State, I think especially in the second half, look, he had 1 assist to 4 turnovers.
All 4 turnovers in the second half.
But I'm telling you, man, if the opportunity was there, if you really got into him, you could have doubled that number. He is so obviously not a point guard. He's just not. He's a good shooter. That's what he is this year. Mm-hmm. He's a capable shooter, I agree. But he can't do anything else. And I thought Michigan State could have done even more potentially to really. It
certainly didn't feel like he was going to get by anybody. Like I think he did it I think he got the foul early. That was like the first point. They had a free throw. He split a pair of free throws, but he really never. I mean, I think he just do it. He would just kind of fake them out that he was going to drive, and then just pull up and shoot a 3. So. And then Burnett, boy, he really did not ever want to have the ball. He was trying to get rid of it as soon as he got it.
I'm telling you, now it's going to be a different story in Ann Arbor because presumably they'll have McDaniel back. But this game, man, it's the one thing he does, and they just let him do it too easily for too much of this game.
Speaking of Llewellyn and guarding, live ball turnovers was the second key to the game. Michigan State had a number of steals. Yeah. And so 11. That was obviously 11 steals in a game, which I guess we'd have to look back, but it sure feels like this team is a high steal percentage team compared to most Michigan State teams.
By Michigan State standards, I think.
Yeah, by Michigan State standards, yeah.
They're not, if you look at them compared to the rest of the country, obviously they're not, because it's just not a point of emphasis for Tom Izzo. But I will tell you, I do think this team does a far better job in that regard than many of its predecessors. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to call up Michigan State. There we go. So, you know what? They're 92nd in steal percentage. So
I would have thought it'd be better than that.
But I want to put that into perspective. I'm sorry. 92nd. I'll put that into perspective. You know what they were last year? 333rd. The year before that,
362.
The year before that, 252. The year before that, 331. The year before that, so now we're down to Cassius Winston senior year, 297. The year before that, 282. You get the point.
So we're not imagining that it definitely feels different.
Absolutely. It is very much a defensive corollary in some ways to the way that Michigan State as a turnover team on offense. Here's one for you. I'm gonna wait because I know this comes up a little later. We can talk about it. But let's just say this team is rewriting the Tom Izzo era record books in regards to taking care of the ball. But that's my point, is that we're seeing them do some things. They're not like jaw-dropping by a national standard, but considering the way especially considering the way Michigan State plays defense, they're not designed to be a team that generates a lot of turnovers, but they're doing it, and they're doing it oftentimes via the steal. In fact, I can tell you, so they sit 93rd nationally in turnover percentage, which also it blows out of the water most any Izzo team you can think of. Mm-hmm. But non-steal turnovers, so traveling calls, where a team throws the ball out of bounds, offensive
shot clock violation,
offensive fouls, all that stuff. They're only number 159, so they're thoroughly mediocre in that regard. It's the steals, it's the live ball stuff that's keeping them a top 100 turnover percentage defense overall. So it's definitely a feature of this team. If you watch them at all this season, you know exactly what we're talking about. My favorite one, while we're talking about this, the game was already decided, but it was just so brilliant. 4-on-1 against Trey Holloman.
Okay, it was. I was asked my wife, was that a 4-on-1 or is it a 3-on-1?
4-on-1, and Trey Holloman played them like a fiddle. Just sat back, watched him. It was Llewellyn who made the pass, and must have read him perfectly and took it away. That was unbelievable. If you're a Michigan fan, you'd be losing your mind over that. But Trey Holloman baited him. That's what he did, and made that play. But it was Michigan State's guards are very, very good, as we talked about in the preview, if at help side strips where it's not the primary defender. They'll get some of that. We've seen Trey do it, obviously, most notably to win that game against Maryland, even though it didn't register as a steal. It essentially was. They'll get some of those, but more often than not, I think, are those plays where an opposing player is looking to drive and not his defender, but the help side defender kind of reaches in and picks it off. And those are great plays too, because oftentimes they immediately get you into transition.
Yeah, Tyson had one, and I think that kind of got him going in the second half, where he just kind of took it away and went down to get a layup.
That was a great play. That was a little different than what I'm talking about, though, because that was one where Michigan got an offensive rebound, and he just didn't quit on it and came from behind whomever it was. I want to say it was Cambois, but it was somebody who had just gotten an offensive rebound, and Tyson just didn't quit on the play, came from behind him, stripped him, went down, hit the layup, and that gave Michigan State a lead that they never surrendered. It was a tie game at that point. That play put MSU up 2. They pushed it out. I think they pushed it out to 10 before Michigan scored again, and that was the ball game.
All right, so third key to the game, which we've talked about, I don't know that we need to add much more, is defensive rebounding. Miserable performance from Michigan State, 48% offensive rebounding rate for Michigan.
I'm going to add this. They are now number 203 in defensive rebounding rate. They were number 50 last year. The year before, we didn't think they were great. They were 123. The year before that, we didn't think they were great. They were 107. The year before that, Cassius's last year, we didn't think they were great. They were 91. So this is a negative that is really starting to become, we've talked about them as an inconsistent defensive rebounding team. We're starting to get to the point that you just got to label them a bad one.
I think they are, right, until they prove us wrong at this point.
That's got to change.
Yeah.
It's got to change, because if you're going into postseason play, can they win a lot of games left on their schedule in the Big Ten defensively rebounding this way? Yeah, probably. But, man, you can't have this.
Yeah.
It's just you're giving teams a lifeline, and hey, they got another tough one coming up next with Maryland. Maryland can offensive rebound, so you better bring it. And that's the weird thing is we
they probably play well against them.
Yes, we've noted when they're faced with really good opponents in that area, they tended to show up. It's games like this where Michigan was. I got to look. I want to say they were
93rd or something.
Yeah, and now they're 84th after tonight. But yeah, I think you're right. I think they were 93rd. That's okay. It's not terrible, but that's not the kind of team that should have a 48% rate against you.
No.
So, yeah, disappointing.
On the road, yeah.
You're right, exactly. Disappointing, and they got to figure it out, and I'm going to keep beating the drum on this. It starts with the guard.
Fourth key to the game, pace, which we say every game. I think the pace was second half excellent. First half was the sort of the stagnant half court. They got enough done to stay in the game, shooting and shot well, 50%.
I was mostly okay with it even in the first half, because as we talk about, that doesn't just mean transition play. That means how you're running your half court. And I really didn't have problems outside the first few minutes with Michigan State offensively in the first half. I thought for the bulk of that half, they were okay. I mean, they had 33 points at halftime. That's not great. Yep. That's not great, but it's not a problem. It's not terrible. Second half, obviously they kicked it into high gear and were even better, but I consider this a win. I think and I give a lot of credit to AJ Hoggard. I thought, I didn't even look in detail at AJ's stats in this one, just to see.
He was 15 points, 7 for 14 from the field, 0 for 2 for 3, 1 for 3 from the line, 4 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 to 2 turnovers.
That's a good game. Yeah. That's a good game. And some steals too, right?
Yeah, I think so.
That was I thought he played really, really well, and I liked the tempo that he had them playing at, both in transition and in the half court. And I always say it's that whole thing starts with him. It has to. And I thought he did a nice job. I will say too, there was a moment early in the game where it was MSU's fourth turnover. Then they only committed 2 the whole rest of the way. He had Carson Cooper in a pick and roll, and Carson didn't roll hard enough, and so the pass just went sailing out of bounds. And AJ, it was one of these moments where, like, all right, that's the body language, that's the stuff that can be a problem. But he got it under control. And if you look at the fact that in the second half, he had the confidence in Carson and that play we talked about where he just dropped that pass in, that's really good to see. So signs of growth from AJ Hoggard, but I really liked the way he played this game. And it was in this area in particular that I really liked it. The pace that MSU played at was where they need to be.
Yeah, I think a good explanation, too, of the first, second half differences. 26 field goal attempts in the first half, 35 in the second half.
There you go.
Yeah. Finally, playing under control. And so this is the other point we're going to mention. Michigan State not getting caught up in the emotions. And I never felt like they were too amped up for the game. I mean, I think they played their game, which is good, but they played with some intensity. So I think they're right where they wanted to be for that.
Yeah, I didn't think there was ever a point that I thought, boy, they're tight. They're trying too hard. I didn't think that. I thought, again, as we talked about, if anything, I thought that defensively they didn't bring enough in the first half, but that got sorted out. But here's the thing. One way that can show up is with turnovers, right? With mistakes.
Right.
You're trying to do too much. You're trying to make 99th percentile plays when they're not there to be made, blah, blah, blah. Michigan State had 6 assists tonight in a game, or 6 turnovers.
6 turnovers.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
6 turnovers in a game that was played at a relatively fast clip. You know, what they end up with? How many shots from the floor?
61 free field goal attempts.
Okay, so 60 is kind of your demarcation point for a faster or slower game, depending upon which side of that you fall.
You could almost argue it's a little slower just because they didn't have any free throw attempts either. So
right,
but whatever. Yeah,
they are now 40th in the country in turnover percentage. That is a truly remarkable number that I'm not sure has been fully appreciated with this team. In fact, I'm positive it hasn't, because they're, the losses and all these other problems. But last year they finished 62nd, and I thought, boy, I may never see that again. Again, you can go down the list. I mean, Cassius Winston's final year. So that's an all-time point guard playing for you, and a lot of veterans on that team. 116th in turnover percentage. The year before that, where they go to a Final Four, 175th. I mean, you can go on and on and on, and you will find Michigan State teams, if they're in the hundreds, that's a decent year. There's a lot of years where they're in, they're in the 200s. That happens. And we're talking about good teams that have been able to overcome that. This team is not a great offensive rebounding team, to say the least. After tonight, they're sitting at number 148. They're just ever so slightly above average. Their rebounding rate for the year is 29.8%, and the D1 average is 29.2. So they're right there, not great. But what's making up for it, one of the things that's making up for it, is the fact that they're not turning the ball over. To be in the top 40 in that category, now you could say, well, then look at all the guards they have, they should be there. Okay, fair enough. I could agree with that, but I've seen Michigan State teams with great backcourts before that didn't come close to this. Yeah. So you got to really give these guys credit. They are playing a very clean brand of basketball, and I think it needs to be appreciated. And on a totally unrelated note, you know what else needs to be appreciated? Michigan State's up to 45th in the country in three-point shooting. They are 36.
Wait, I thought they were the worst teams in the country.
36.8% from three. So essentially, they're a 37% shooting team now from deep after tonight. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Oh, and for all the caterwauling about the offense in general, they're sitting at number 29 nationally in adjusted offensive efficiency. Top 30.
What's the defensive adjusted efficiency?
21. So we're talking about a team
pretty balanced team, yeah.
In the top 30 both ways. That is generally the kind of consistency and balance that you are looking for in teams that have a chance to make a run. It's harder if you're an elite offensive team, but you're not great defensively, or vice versa.
Yeah.
Because typically at some point in a tournament run, you're going to have to either have a great day offensively, or you're going to have to really lock somebody down. And if you can only do one of those things, it's hard. Not impossible, but it's harder. It's a lot harder. So those are all, if you're looking for positive signs for a team that's 5-5 in the league at the turn, these are some pretty good ones that I just reeled off.
It is amazing that their defensive efficiency rating is that high, considering that they are an abysmal defensive rebounding team. I mean, if they were just
really
a little above average, like they're 120th or something.
I'll tell you what the key is. They're 64th in percentage given up from three, and I gotta say, interestingly, they don't do a great job of limiting three-point attempts. So the percentage is a big positive there. They're 47th against twos, and part of that is helped by, and this might surprise some people, because I know I don't think about this as a particularly great shot blocking team, Michigan State's had ones that leaped out at you more than this one does, that category. They're
Jaron Jackson team.
They're 34th in block percentage.
Wow. I guess they had 5 today. That's quite a bit.
Yeah.
I mean,
and we talked about the steals being a part of this team in a way they aren't normally.
Sure.
So there are a lot of positives that are offsetting that horrible defensive rebounding number. And just imagine how good they'd be if that was at a more even like, say, 100 or 90.
Right. Yeah, no, I know exactly.
You'd be even better. You'd be a top 15, maybe even a top 10 defense. So there's a lot to like when you look at the profile. I say that to just let listeners know, as Izzo said, ain't dead yet.
No. Yeah. And there's screws to tighten still on this team,
Absolutely.
right? I mean, there are things that can be corrected before we get into the time when it counts.
Mostly defensive rebounding. And I would say my feeling is at this stage, consistent game in, game out defensive execution. I mean, we saw it tonight. Yeah.
Right.
They played one brilliant defensive half and one pretty shitty one. You can't have that.
Yeah.
But overall, the profile looks really good.
All right. Well, I think we're going to get out of here. We'll see you guys in a couple days as we do our Maryland pregame, as we'll play the second game at the Breslin Center. So again, check out our sponsors at the Final Four on the schedule.com/support. And you can find all our sponsors there, links to everything. And anyway, it's a great place to hang out for a few minutes. So until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go Green.